Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so used to saying good morning, everyone, to SOC 100, but this is actually a good afternoon. We're starting a little bit later today. Greg, we're here as well, too. We got Greg Ake, co-founder, Level Effect. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, wherever you might be. We've got another stream over here at Level Effect today for detection engineering. Greg, welcome. Welcome officially to the stream. Let me know if you can hear me over there. See a mic check happening. Wait a minute. No, I can't hear you anymore. I just heard you. So Greg's mic was literally just working like 5 minutes ago, but of course, as soon as I cut on the actual stream, mic check happens. So all good. How's everyone doing? In the meantime, while Greg's working on the headset over there. Evening for Jacopo. Karina, good to have you back. Still morning for you. Our double. Yeah, I know. It's right. Good afternoon. Always, I made the same. I wanted to say good morning as well. Wait, I heard you there, I think.
Hello.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There we go. Greg, welcome officially now. Sounds good.
It's a good start.
Yeah, good start.
We've had today.
Nice, cool. Looks like we're coming up to just about 20 people in the chat over here, so people rolling in. Probably going to get a bit of a different crowd today too, going into the afternoon instead of the morning. But we got over here Kumo's over here, Jacopo, Karina, McCurdy, Demorier, Linde, or Linde. I'm pretty sure I see you from Discord over there. Patricia, Pickle, R Double, Ricky, Yard, and Sam, and a couple more people rolling in right now as well too. Good to have everyone here. Happy Saturday. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
Pretty good. It's kind of early for you though, right? We got Greg on nice and early.
I'm on the Pacific time zone, so 9 a.m. isn't theoretically too early, but I'm a night owl. I'm usually up till 3 a.m. So yeah, I'm going on about 5 hours of sleep right now. So
yeah, nice and frosty.
Yeah, I just downed my monster, so it should be kicking in here shortly, and I'll be all right.
Nice.
Thanks for the warm welcomes. Seeing a lot of the nice messages there.
Yeah, I think some of the other students would appreciate that. Actually, we got quite a few in the West Coast, so they got to sleep in a little bit finally. We got West Coast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it could just be a little bit sunnier than the rain I've been getting, that'd be nice.
Yeah, it's a nice wish. Kind of like England out there on the west.
The Pacific Northwest, yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So I hope everyone's excited. Who here is it? So who in chat that's here today? Is it your first time with detection engineering content? That's the real question. Has anyone seen detection engineering content at any point in their life before? Oh, CI. Okay. Nice. One familiar face. First timer for Joe. Oh, wait, no, it's first timer for CI, you mean? All right. Cool. All right. R double, yeah, first time for you, Demorier. So yeah, Demorier, you've done BTL 1. That's right. There's a little bit of a touch and go on that and over there. Yeah, that's right. Other than SOC 100. So Greg, you've got a lot of newcomers.
Nice.
Don't go easy on them.
I won't. Yeah. So when do you want to get started, man?
We'll get started, I guess, like a minute over here, just kind of letting people roll in. Twitch usually plays like a 2 to 3 minute ad when people are joining, at least the first time. So kind of just like a little bit of chat and banter. Then we'll kick it off.
I just had that a minute ago. I learned about State Farm insurance. So
nice. A lot of ads in that.
Yep.
Pickle, you've seen Yar and BTL 1 as well, too. Okay, so some familiar faces. First time for Jacopo as well. So you got a bunch of Yara folk some BTL1 crew and some brand new people inside of everything over here. So we're up at 32 in the chat right now. People are starting to roll in a little bit more. Very nice. Greg, feel free to introduce a little bit. I'll get your screen shared in a moment, but maybe share for the students. Like what are they in for today?
Yeah, so the goal of this in the SOC 100-5 detection engineering content, we're going to be talking about detection engineering as we'd expect.
Yep.
But I really want to get us some exposure to not only the Sigma standard, which has thousands of rules for you to play with, but what we're going to be doing today is actually setting up our range environment where we can actually emulate adversary tradecraft. We will be running malicious and suspicious commands in our virtual range, and we're going to be practicing creating just sort of off the cuff. We're going to be writing detections in ELK, and effectively we're going to run an attack, observe what it looks like. We're going to then talk about, okay, how would we detect this? What are some good strategies for detection? And I'll try to impart to you some of my strategies and things that I've observed working as a detection engineer in my day job. And then we're going to test our theories by rerunning those attacks and seeing, did we get a match? Did we get a positive hit on what we hope to match in our sim? So through that life cycle, you'll be able to test, research, and validate your detection strategies. But this is also going to be applicable if you want to get good at threat hunting and you want to emulate threats and go looking for it in the logs and seeing what that looks like. This is sort of like a light purple team kind of experience. It's not fully fleshed out, but you're going to get a little taste of sort of what that entails. And to sort of kick things off, we're going to talk, do a little bit of lecture content just to sort of set the ground floor on like what detection engineering is and some general concepts on processes and truth tables and things like that before we jump into the technical fun.
Cool. That's a lot. I think we're going to have some trained detection engineers after this stream.
Yeah,
awesome.
I'm wondering how we're gonna knock this out in a little less than 2 hours. So we're gonna probably
see how she goes.
Jump around a few labs. I'll be very clear when we're doing that. We probably won't complete any one lab to fully finished, but I'll be very clear when we're jumping between them.
Sounds good. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you, Greg. Let's get to it then. I'm going to get the screen cut over to your screen that you can share in 1, 2, 3. Okay, there we go. Lecture slides are up. Screen is ready. Greg, they're all yours. I'll be here. Have fun, everyone.
Thank you. Yep. All right. Yeah. So detection engineering is effectively a process. We could list out all the skills and the knowledge and everything that would go into it, but fundamentally speaking, we're going to design, develop, and deploy detection content. And when I use the term content, I'm referring to the actual rule logic. So we're going to write logic that matches a pattern or an indicator, a specific indicator that we want to match, right? So if we think about what the job is at a very high level, there is a ton of data coming from all of our sensors, from the technologies we use, and our job is to effectively create patterns that match events. And when I refer to an event, I'm usually referring to a record or a log or a point in time observation, right? So on Windows, we would call them event logs that would say, hey, in this event log, a user has just logged in with this user account. They've logged in via the local console or over the network. So that is an event, sort of this point in time observation. What really makes sort of the science of it is that sort of engineering process around the development and the deployment, because that's where the engineering term comes from. We write code, we build tools and capabilities to take concepts, or hey, we saw an adversary just do this. They compromised our network using some novel technique. Well, we don't have a security control. We don't have a means to do something about that. But we're not gonna, sit on our hands. We're gonna go make something. We're gonna trial, an MVP, a proof of concept, and we're gonna see what we could do with that, and get that deployed to see how we can detect and hopefully reduce that attacker's dwell time in our network. But sort of the art to this skill set is the second statement here on this slide, right? Where it's a targeted approach, and it's that cross section of detection, coverage, visibility, and identified organizational risk. And I guess the most plain way I could put this is, if your organization doesn't know what they're trying to do from a security lens, your job is going to be hard as a detection engineer, because then it sort of turns into, well, we'll try to detect everything because we don't have a specific goal. And if we don't have a goal, we don't really know if we're doing good or meeting the needs of the organization. So there's a lot of interpersonal communication, a lot of education. The detection engineering team where I work, we meet with other teams, we share them what we're doing, how we do our job. Hey, we're finding this, we're going to write a detector that matches that, to get feedback, but also to provide them an awareness of how we operate, so that we can get that feedback necessary for us to know, are we doing a good job? So bringing those interpersonal skills, those teaching, educational, like idea sharing skills, is really, and sandwiched on top of all the technical skills, is really what detection engineering is all about. And I think, last but not least, having a thick skin, because we're in the business of hearing things like, we just got compromised, why didn't we detect that? And like, it's your job to detect all the things, right? So it can feel personal at times when somebody says, we didn't detect this, what's going on? And you have to analyze the situation, and you work with the incident response team to say, okay, what are your findings, what happened, what techniques? And sometimes it's super sexy, like, oh, they did this really sophisticated thing. Or sometimes it's sort of like a wah, like, where you're just like, oh, the adversary changed the formatting of how they wrote that, and our rule was too specific. And because it was too specific, it was brittle, and it didn't work to match what we intended. So some other things to consider. I want you to get you in the mindset of, this isn't like us versus them, but it's us working together as a team. Detection engineering, and by extension our detections, are going to make a claim, right? So if I'm doing the research on an adversary technique, their tradecraft, and I write a rule to match that tradecraft, or at least that's my hope, is that it's going to match it every time, my detector is going to make a claim. And the claim is, this is a positive match, or this is a negative match. Now, if it's a negative match, we're not going to tell anybody. The SOC and other people don't care to see, hey, we didn't match on like 2 million events. Nobody wants that metric. But they are going to want to see the positive matches. This rule matched this event, right? That's what we're in the business to make happen. The analyst on the security operations team must evaluate these claims and say if they concur or not occur. And that's typically observed through a true or false statement. So what you end up having is, you have this positive or negative claim, and then you have a true or false attached to it. So on the latter table here, we see true positive. The event was confirmed to be an accurate match. Hey, the detector said this is a thing, this is an event we're trying to match, and the analyst looking at it concurred. Yes, this is a true positive, meaning, hey, your rule said it was going to detect Mimikatz, and this is Mimikatz being ran on a Windows server. That is a true positive match. This is a successful instance of a rule doing its job, and the analyst being able to triage it effectively and come to some resolution. Then we have a false positive. The event was confirmed to be an inaccurate match, right? So this is where the rule says, this is a match. We want to match this event. And the analysts look at it and they say, no, this is a false positive. And, what type of false positives do we come up against? A lot of the time, the ones that I find funny in my job is the things that administrators do to hack their way around getting something done. Anthony spent a lot of his time in the MSP space, so he's probably seen some people do some like hacky, you're remote, you're trying to manage other assets. So you'll do weird things, like you might use certutil to download something on a remote host. That is adversary tradecraft, but it can be used legitimately. It could be benign behavior, but it will still match our rules. So that's usually when analysts might mark something as a false positive, when we're matching something we don't intend to match. And there's a lot of gray area there with what we intend to match. So this is, again, where communication between the SOC, what is the SOC trying to do? How does the detection engineering team support that? I wish it was the detection engineering team gets to dictate everything we do with every detection, but that is not how it works in the real world. Our job is to provide opportunities, and the SOC has to triage them. And if we match too many things, we're going to burn them out, right? And then we have a false negative. This is that example where I told you about having thick skin. The event did not match any detection logic, but was in fact malicious. So this is an incident or an event where it didn't match any of our rules. So no alert was generated, but maybe the SOC is doing some threat hunting, or maybe somebody reported, hey, my computer's running really slow, and the incident response team investigated, and they said, oh, this computer has malware on it, or it has an adversary running commands, right? We didn't detect anything. So that would be an example of a false negative. So we have true positive, false negative. There are other conditions here, but really outside the scope of what we're trying to sort of cover today. Really quickly, I'll leave you guys to read these slides later. I know I'm already running a little long here, but the general process here is we need a detection use case. Again, we have to know our goals. What are we trying to accomplish as a team? We're going to then research and develop detectors for that. We're going to emulate that threat. We read a blog and it says this, new threat actor group is running this command or using this tool. We'll try to get a copy of that tool. We'll try to emulate that command or run it in a virtual environment. And we're going to then go on to experimentation through deployment. We're going to see how it performs in our production environment. And then if everything looks good, it's going to go into production in the last stage. And that's where we're going to start monitoring the performance of that rule. Specifically, the true positive, false positive ratio, right? We want to start collecting metrics on how many times the SOC says this is a true event versus a false event, because that's a good indicator to us on the detection team, where our rules are performing, where they need to be improved, and any potential misses that we're having. So I see Anthony asking a question there. Is this making sense? So is it making sense, or is this all gelling well so far?
Yeah, we kind of just jumped right into it. So any questions, right? Is this kind of what you thought it was from what we learned so far? Yeah, good so far. Rick, yeah, nice. Okay, cool. Good.
So at a high level, something to consider is when you look at, maybe your company or the organization you work for, or you're just interested in detection engineering. A lot of organizations don't have dedicated detection engineering teams. They might have a SOC analyst who sort of moonlights as a detection engineer. And then as your organization matures, you might start going up through these defined maturity levels, right? So very quickly, that level 1 is I'm using third-party detection content with minimal tuning. So I bought an EDR product, and this product provides me detections. And I just sort of say, okay. And I might do minimal tuning. Like, hey, this one alert for WinZip is happening a lot, and I don't want to see WinZip alerts, so I'm going to suppress that. I'm going to silence that alert. And that's really what level 1 is. You're just doing very basic maintenance and monitoring of those detections. Managed using open source reporting to guide the creation, right? So this is, you have some time. Your organization has said, hey, we need to improve our detections. We're going to give you some time to out of your workday to sort of review the latest happenings, right? Maybe we have an intel team and they can summarize and provide this information to us, or we just go and source it ourselves and just basically do a lot of reading. And from there, we come up with ideas for detections. Defined is detection use cases are sourced from internal feedback. So this is when you sort of see the sort of progression here. Now we're at the phase where the detection team is actually communicating with internal stakeholders, and they're saying, hey, we detected this, or we didn't detect this, or hey, we detected this, but it's not a very good detection. We don't want to see that ever again, so please burn it with fire. So we're starting to get that feedback from internal stakeholders. And then sort of when you get to that level 4 measured is when you start getting instrumentation in your environment, where you can start monitoring the performance of your detections. And some basic metrics are, again, the true positive, false positive ratio. You could start recording how long it takes between the real event from occurring on the observed device versus when the detection fired. So you could say, hey, our detection engine is always about a minute behind the real world activity. So we just have a minute latency whenever somebody does something bad on a computer. We're about a minute behind. And then you could also record how long does it take to triage that detection or that alert once identified, right? So you could then say, hey, on average, it takes our SOC about 10 minutes to triage an alert before they close it or take some action, right? So doing those kinds of metrics, we can identify troublesome detections or areas of improvement. And optimized, this is sort of when we get into the researchy headspace. This is when we're proactively researching threats, we're emulating threats, we're writing our own custom tooling, we're thinking outside the box and building solutions for these things that we're learning about. The cyber kill chain, it's just the different steps that an adversary might go through. And then once you get here to this exploitation, installation, command and control, adversaries will use a technique called lateral movement to move around in a network. And it'll sort of keep this sort of cycle going. They'll exploit, install themselves, they'll have command and control so that they could talk to that compromised host, and then they'll move laterally. And their whole goal is to find juicy data on the organization and to steal credentials to further their access in the network. But this really relates to the opportunity cost. There's not a lot of steps in the cyber kill chain, but there are an unlimited number of permutations in how an adversary might do this. So an example of what that looks like is we have the MITRE ATT&CK framework. The MITRE ATT&CK framework covers 12 tactics, over 200 techniques, and if we go all the way to the right, nearly 12,000 procedures. Those are known procedures. There are many procedures that are not known, and there are many that are known but not shared with MITRE, because MITRE has a very particular process in how you curate and share information with them. You have to publish a blog, you have to provide evidence, you have to make a submission to them, and it usually takes a couple months for that data to sort of appear in the MITRE release when they release them on a semi-regular basis. So there's a lot of information that isn't shared publicly. But as we can see, there's 12,000 known things. And what this really boils down to, as a detection engineer, it's easy to boil the ocean. It's easy to get really overwhelmed when you're trying to detect threats, because it's a target-rich environment. There's a lot of opportunities to write rules. And it goes back to what I said previously. If your organization or you do not have a goal with what you're trying to improve, you're left looking at things like this, where it's like, okay, well, we could do anything. And then that's not a very measurable and repeatable process. So we need to aim small and miss small, right? Like, hey, let's get good at persistence mechanisms and these 5 tactics. We're gonna get really good at those because we know from our research and reading online that a lot of adversaries use it. So we're not gonna catch everything, but we're going to get really good at this. And then we're going to start adding onto that. And it just takes time. People think that detection engineering is like, all right, we have a detection engineer. Now we're going to just detect everything and be awesome. No, I helped build a team, and we're almost starting year 3, and we still have a long way to go. We're really good at what we're good at, but there's a lot of things we're not good at, and we know about them and we're improving. And that's just the reality of things. This is not an overnight solve for X kind of a process. It is tedious. To sort of break down what those procedures look like, we have one tactic under privilege escalation, and we have T1548 abusive and elevation control. And if we look at just one of them, bypass UAC, it has over 72 procedures for just one technique. And again, there was a couple hundred techniques in this framework. And this is why you have thousands of procedures to relatively not as many techniques. So again, that's just sort of reinforcing that there's a lot to do, and we can't do it all. If you wanted to do all of MITRE, you'd need a team of 15 to 25 people working full-time to make a huge dent in a year, which is not realistic for the vast majority of organizations. So detection engineering is done in conjunction with some other skill sets. We have a lot of similar tradecraft and value to the organization. So you have detection engineering, closing the gap. Again, we know what our goals are from a detection lens. We're working to close the gap, meaning we have detection content to match the things we intend to match. We have threat hunters who are looking for the things we're not aware of, or they're validating, are we not detecting as well as we think we are? They're going to go and look for that. We could have the red team who is emulating threats, running malicious commands in our production network, trying to evade our SOC to see what they could get away with. And sort of the combination of all these skills and processes working in concert and communicating is effectively what purple teaming is. It is a process of saying, we're going to evaluate how good we are at detecting persistence mechanisms. The threat hunting team is going to look for instances that we might not have detections for yet. The red team is going to try to bypass all of those and see how successful they are. And we're going to sort of measure that success in an after action review amongst all the team members. And of course, talking with our security analyst to see, what did you observe and what were your feelings on how successful we were on detecting and or thwarting these attacks. Or maybe we didn't detect anything. We have a lot of false negatives that we have to fix. And that's it for those slides. Any questions? I know slides are super, super fun.
Got to get the foundations out, make sure that everyone's tracking. Yeah, it's just how the slides go.
So I like to use the terminology referred to as a fatal funnel. It's used by police and military. It's relatively talking about a choke point. Whether we're talking about a script kiddie or an advanced threat actor, they all have to interact with the computer in roughly the same way. They might do it with varying degrees of sophistication, but they have to go through that fatal funnel. And that fatal funnel is effectively a logical choke point on the operating system, right? Like, you can't have malware that is completely invisible to the operating system, because then the operating system couldn't run it, right? So there are vulnerabilities in how red teamers and adversaries operate. They have to expose themselves enough to get their malware to run, to get it to persist, to get communication, right? So this is why adversaries do things like masquerading. They'll try to make their malware look legitimate, or they'll Trojanize it and hide it in a legitimate, business application or tool that we want to use. They'll try to hide their network traffic to look like it's going to Twitch or Discord or something like that. Maybe Twitch wouldn't be a good idea at a workplace, because that'd probably get HR to find out. But if it was going to Slack or something like that, you could probably hide that communication a lot longer than just some really random communication. So these are all choke points. These are all logical things that, regardless of skill, adversaries have to engage and deal with these risks. And as you start researching and getting familiar with how adversaries operate, and you're going through your detection maturity process of building detections and learning about threats, you start to observe these fatal funnels that, hey, we can boil the ocean. We can try to make 12,000 detections for all 12,000 procedures. But really, there's quite a few areas where we can detect most threats if we're just really, really good in a few key places. And that's the whole concept of a fatal funnel. And an example of that would be persistence mechanisms. So here we have an example of a command run to add a service called Windows Update to the run key. Effectively, when the computer boots and a user logs in, it's going to run a service called WinUpdate, and it's going to run this winupdate.exe from the C user's public documents folder, right? So this is a very suspicious location, just because usually you would be C users and your name. The public is a general public account by default on Windows machines. So somebody using it specifically for anything Windows Update would be pretty suspicious. And then doing the same thing, you could have service control. So SC create Windows Update service with the bin path of the same location. So the vulnerability here is there is a binary of Windows Update referenced in both commands. They're two different procedures to get the same persistence mechanism. We want to create a service called Windows Update, and we want to run this binary when the computer boots. So if we did our research and we got really good at identifying and triaging binaries associated with these auto runs, these persistence mechanisms, we could, in short order, start identifying suspicious and malicious binaries and commands and scripts very quickly without, again, doing thousands of detections. We could do probably 10, 15 detections and be really good to get off the ground with some persistence mechanisms. Any questions so far? I just included some common auto run locations, these persistence mechanisms for you to peruse and look at when you have free time. And I just wanted to share my detection mantra here at the end. In the end, my goal is to not boil the ocean by detecting everything, but optimizing our detection content to focus on the things that matter, or in other words, create strong signals to noise ratios that our SOC team can actually respond to. It is very frustrating as a detection engineer to make a good detection that the SOC ignores because it's just noisy and it takes a lot of time to triage. And let me be clear here, it's a true positive malicious detection. But the SOC will say, well, every time that detection fires, we had 3 other detections that identified that activity before it got there. So we start to ask ourselves, do we even need that last detection? Is it warranted? If they're going to ignore it anyways, do we just lower the priority where nobody looks at it if we're really good at detecting it in other means? And that, again, is the art and science of engaging with the teams and talking how they use our detections to best optimize their workflow so that they don't get burned out, the analysts, and they can do their job effectively at identifying and containing threats. So
Pretty
there
good
are
mantra.
particular places where we see fatal funnels. Yeah, there are. The easiest example, the most clear example, in my opinion, are these auto runs, these persistence mechanisms, right? An adversary is going to compromise your computer, and more often than not, they're going to want to persist. And what that simply means is, if you log off of your machine or reboot your computer, if they had just launched their malware and they don't have a persistence mechanism, they will lose that access when your computer reboots, meaning they would have to phish you again, or they'd have to exploit you again to get access back. So typically malware or an adversary, when they're hands-on keyboards running commands, one of the early things they're going to do is going to get a basic persistence mechanism. That way, if you log out or reboot your computer, when your computer comes back online, it'll establish a connection back to the attacker again so that they can finish up their operation, right? It really sucks to do all the weaponization, the preparation, the exploitation to have it burned because you hacked somebody at the end of their workday and didn't have an opportunity to set a persistence mechanism. So this specifically is a good example of a lot of locations, as I've provided there, where you can look to see what kind of persistence exists on your computer. Yeah, no worries.
Nice.
So here is a lab we're going to sort of jump into. We're going to be using our victim machine. So I already have my victim and attacker machines up. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be installing and configuring Atomic Red Team. And Atomic Red Team is an open source project made by the company Red Canary, who's a managed detection and response company. So you send them your telemetry and they sort of sell you detections and the remediation steps, and they help you sort of remediate through that intrusion. So they made this tool that allows us to emulate threats. We're able to run these commands and sort of emulate what an adversary would do. And this is really great for us when we are first learning, or we want to observe what that data might look like on the computer. Like, hey, I read about this technique in a blog, but I don't know what that really looks like. What is that? What happens? What artifacts are left? What evidence is left on the computer? What does that look like in our logs? And we can answer that question with Atomic Red Team. There are other frameworks and tools out there, but Atomic Red Team is really well known. Really, it's used by a lot of people, and there's hundreds and hundreds of tests available for us to use for free, which is really great. So we're going to set that up today, and we're going to then go into Sigma next, and using SIM. Got a question here. I've been wondering about job roles in detection engineering and threat hunting. It sounds like organizations might have DE as part of their SOC, and others may have their own DE department. That's absolutely correct. When you're looking for detection engineering jobs, you'll see titles sort of deviate between two spheres, where on one end, you'll see, senior detection engineer, principal detection engineer, junior detection engineer, those kinds of roles. And then you'll see sort of the same levels, but they'll say detection and response. And when you hear things where they reference detection and response, typically that means you are the detection engineer and the analyst who will triage it. So if you write a bad detection, you will be the first to know, because you're going to write your detection and then you're going to respond to it and triage those incidents. Red Canary, from what I understand, operates that way. To be a detection engineer on their team, you will also triage detections that your team produces. Hope that answered your question.
Sounds like you don't want to make your life difficult, basically.
You don't want to make anybody's life difficult. You will hear about it.
Yeah.
Let you know.
Nice.
All right. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to go to our victim machine, and we're going to launch PowerShell as an administrator, and we're going to run this command to install PowerShell YAML. I've already got a terminal open. We're going to run that PowerShell YAML install. Sometimes it takes just a minute. It wants to be funky. So we'll give that just a moment. But yeah, to sort of the last question there too, some organizations don't have detection engineers at all. They have just SOC analysts who sort of, through their own volition and wanting to make things better, sort of take it upon themselves to start improving things. And why is it not typing? Well, that's unfortunate. It doesn't want to let me type.
Just give it a refresh. Is it the VM?
There we go. All right, cool. So you might have to just run it a few times. But yeah, so sometimes you have oh, I'm not sharing my machine. There we go. Here we go.
Yeah. There you go.
There we go. Right. So I ran that command, install module named PowerShell YAML. You can see there were some issues. I just reran it again. And you're going to want to hit Y for yes to install everything. And it should install for you without hopefully any issues. The next command in this lab on step 4, we're going to actually install Atomic Red Team. And it's this one long command here. And there we go. It's installing Atomic Red Team for us. It's weird, Anthony, when I'm tabbing between, it's like losing the context of my keyboard on the terminal.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wonder if that's just like a screen share thing going on with our setup. It shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
Maybe just refresh the tab as well too. Maybe the session's a little wonky. Now, there is a thing with the virtual machines. When you go back and forth with the copy paste, you want to click on the title bar where it says Windows PowerShell, or somewhere in the desktop. Or I know that can get in the way too.
Yeah.
Like with your copy paste, yeah.
So it looks like it's installing it. I'll wait till I get a prompt back up, and we'll try to evaluate if it installed correctly. But effectively, once it installs, all we have to run is invoke -atomic test to see if it was working for us.
While that's going,
Red Team is complete, and I'm going to write invoke atomic test. And there we go. Because it's asking us, you can see here, it's asking us for an atomic technique to test. So Atomic Red Team is installed. I'll leave that up just for a moment before I clear my screen so you could review. We installed the PowerShell YAML module right here. Install module PowerShell YAML. We ran this longer command. Where is it at? Right here. This IEX. This is download and execute. this install atomic red team. Once that was completed, we can then run the command invoke atomic test, and you should get an output like this: the command invoke atomic test at command pipeline position 1, supply a value for the following parameters, and then we're good to go. You're going to say something, Anthony?
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, because I thought it was actually going to take a little bit longer to connect while you're doing the commands, but I was going to say, so it might be good for the viewers to hear as well. Do you use this at work, or have you used this?
Atomic red team. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
A free tool that all of you can use.
So this is a professional level tool. Yeah.
My brain just had a brain fart there. Go to Snap Attack. It was just acquired by Cisco, but Snap Attack is a platform that lets you search for MITRE tactics techniques. There is a listing and mapping of all of the atomic red team tests. There's a community here where people are making community tests. So there's tests in here that aren't in the official atomic red team thing. And I'm not sure if they do it for the free account, but on our paid account, we play around with this. It'll actually run a VM, and you can sort of do what we're doing in this lab. You could run a VM, you can run atomic red team, it'll create the logs, it'll send it to their Splunk instance where you could search through it. So very much what we're doing in this lab, Snap Attack is a platform. It's a professional detection engineering playground where you can run simulations, you can evaluate what the logs look like. So everything we're doing in the lab, this is a paid for platform if you wanted to do it at your place of business and they were willing to spend the money on this. It's not like most security tools are not cheap. The one value that I really appreciate Snap Attack is they have analysts who are researching threats, and they're actually matching the TTPs and the MITRE tactics to a threat. So you can say, hey, I want to get better at detecting Akira ransomware. They literally have a page on Akira ransomware with links to their blogs, other people's blogs and research, and they provide a list of all the known tactics and techniques, and they've even built custom tests that emulate that known threat actor. So within minutes, you can be running attacks looking like Akira ransomware. So you can see, hey, we've got a lot of false negatives here. We've got a lot of ground to cover to improve. So again, we can do that manually with Atomic Red Team and our own research, or you could pay for a platform. At the end of the day, you will get the same result, just at a slightly different speed and ease of use. So if you're a detection team of 1 to 2, Snap Attack would be a friend. This is a force multiplier. There are other platforms like Prelude Security who does a very similar thing to this that you can utilize to help, as, again, a force multiplier for you as a detection engineer.
Nice.
All right, so I'm going to clear my screen. And going back to the lab, one of the things I want to do is I want to set us up with a profile to run Atomic Red Team, to load this module every time PowerShell opens. So for those of you who are unaware, there are profiles tied to your PowerShell terminal, and we can configure them to say, hey, every time I launch PowerShell, please make sure Atomic Red Team is loaded in the background because I regularly use it and I want to be able to reference it. Even though, and why we're doing that, if I close this terminal right now, and I come back and I try to do the invoke atomic test, I won't get this. It'll say, hey, this is an unrecognized commandlet or scriptlet. And it's because this is only showing up right now because it's currently loaded in this current temporary profile, if you will. So we need to go persist that by typing in, let me get the command here. We're going to open up Notepad, the very advanced tool of Notepad, and we're going to do profile, I think it is. Let me just double check before I run that. Notepad profile, yep. And we can say, hey, this profile doesn't exist. Do you want to create a new file? We're going to say yes. And it's just a blank file. In the next step, on step 7 in that lab, there is this bit of code that we're going to paste in this Notepad. And basically what happens is every time we launch PowerShell, we're saying, hey, PowerShell, import this module, invoke Atomic Red Team, and we're setting the default parameter values to this location, right? So because this is now going to be set as our default profile, we're going to click Save, File and Save. When we open up this PowerShell terminal later, it should work for us. So let's test that. We're going to close the PowerShell window. I'm going to run PowerShell as administrator. And I should be able to invoke atomic test. And there we go. I've got my commandlet working. So now Atomic Red Team is fully installed. I can reference it on the command line. And what's even cooler is we can run scripts that reference Atomic Red Team now in PowerShell, and it will run. So we can even build in automations. So you could do this for building large test suites. So let's say we spend some time and we made 50 or 100 net new detections for a series of tactics and techniques, and we have a list of all these Atomic Red Team tests. You could literally write a bash script, a PowerShell script, a Python script, whatever you want, that effectively runs all of those tests. And you can now see, do my detections run against that? And this is sort of referred to as regression testing. If I made 100 rules and I just put them on a shelf and never touch them again, there's no guarantee that in a week, a month, a year, those rules will work as expected. The operating system changes, the data changes, the threats change. There's a lot of variables that are happening that we as detection engineers must contend with. But now I can have this automated test where I say, when those detections were working really well and I ran these tests, I had 152 alerts. I wait a week, I run the command, I got 149. I'm missing 3 alerts. What changed, right? So this is sort of keying us in that there's deviations in our detection content. Maybe something isn't working, maybe data format change. It could be many, many different things. But this is, again, when you're very much in the later stages of the maturity model for a detection team. This is when you're proactively assessing and testing yourselves. You're not just waiting for, I hope we catch a bad guy today. No, we're going to proactively evaluate ourselves through red teaming, regression testing, to see how we're performing over time. We're going to identify rules that aren't performing. We're going to proactively tune them, research, and fix them. And you might be, maybe you're thinking to yourself, how often does this happen? This is the majority of our job when you get to the maturity level. We have, I think in like almost 3 years, we've written about 1,400 custom rules on a team of 5 people. That's fully researched, tested, emulated, and about, I'm going to make up this number, but it feels right in my heart, that about 70% of our time is spent on maintaining and tuning that existing content. The other 30% is net new use cases. All right, any questions? I know I'm throwing a lot at you. There's a lot going on here.
It's a lot. 1,400 rules.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
I feel it in my bones.
Yeah.
it's been a journey, man. It's been a lot.
Yeah, the maintenance of that alone, as it keeps on scaling up with more and more rules, like, I guess, a question just from my end too, maybe the chat might help out with that, is what does that mean? Like, what does maintenance of that mean? Like, how do you keep record of 1,400 rules that they're working well? Like, what are the processes involved in that, I guess?
That's a good question. And it's getting to 80% is easy. Getting to 100% is more work than getting to 80%. And that is very true in detection engineering. Writing 1,400 rules is not hard. It just takes time. So, hours in a day times the average time it takes to make a detection times number of people. You can project with a relative accuracy. Like, I'll know where we're going to be in a year within a couple hundred detections, depending on, the research and, industry trends. But building the instrumentation to know how well those detections are working is the bane of my existence. It doesn't ever feel done. We're still improving and adding on things. And if you like solving problems and riddles, detection engineering is a great job for that, because you're constantly learning about threats and how adversaries are getting past you. But also, it's like golf in that you're battling yourself, because anytime we add new telemetry that looks at our processes, not did we detect threats? I mean, that's a part of it for sure. It's a big part of it. But when we're talking about how are our detectors performing, how does the SOC like them, like trying to gather that sentiment in our analytics, you end up having more questions than answers, I feel, a lot of the time. And we start to identify things that we thought were good that aren't as good as we thought. So that it just feels there's a lot of job security and always chasing that improvement, because there's always areas to improve, because adversaries are always deviating and changing how they operate. We're battling human and human ingenuity, and that is there's no number count on the permutations that people will solve for getting something done. So it's the majority of our work is just trying to maintain this stuff. Yeah.
Crazy. CI is asking, is your team on call? Yeah, that's a good question. Like a SOC analyst, right? Like they can be on call, instant response and such, but DE.
Thankfully, I work at a wonderful place that has a 24-hour SOC. The detection engineering team is a typical Monday through Friday 9 to 5 affair, right? So we get to have a normal quality of life, which is great. And we have a really, really great team, very supportive team. I've been in security for 20 years, and there are too many things I still don't know. I almost guarantee it. There's some things you guys did in SOC 100 that I haven't seen all the SOC 100 material that some of you have. I guarantee you there's a few things you know that I don't know. There's just too much to know. You know what I mean? It's like saying I want to be a doctor, and it's like, well, what type? You could be a neurosurgeon or a podiatrist. That's a huge difference in the schooling. And using a scalpel, making on one you can never do long division again, and the other you can't walk again, right? So pick your poison. So all that is to say is be humble, be assertive what you feel is right, because detection engineering is very much, we need to detect more, and you need to be able to push back and say, no, not more, but better. We need to be more targeted. We need to be more specific. There are times when more is what we want. We really don't know what we're going to get. Like maybe we have a hypothesis of adversaries are doing this, but it's so foreign to everybody on the team, we don't really know. So we're just like, we're going to make some rules and just see what sticks, right? And we're going to use it sort of hunting rules. We're just going to put some things out there, some feelers. They're going to be noisy. They're going to be low confidence. We might not even send them to the SOC. The SOC might not even be aware of them. And we're just going to see what sort of comes back to us for us to then triage, right? So we make detections to make detections, right?
Yeah.
Death is one course on level effects. So I was wondering the relationship between DE and threat hunting. I think DE is part of the prevention and TH is part of the response.
Yeah, our double's kind of asking. Yeah, the same.
Yeah, detection engineering and threat hunting or death is sort of the new parlance over the past, I'd say, 3 years. It's because we rely on a lot of the same skill sets. So let me break down the two as succinctly as I can. A threat hunter will create a hypothesis. Adversaries are abusing service control persistence mechanisms in our network. We saw the example of a service control persistence mechanism, but that's a hypothesis, a very simple statement. We can test that. We can proactively run remote commands on computers. We can look in our logs if we're collecting that information, and we can validate, within a day that, there's some suspicious or malicious things happening. We can do that. A detection engineer, very similarly, would say, reading a lot of things, we should probably detect these persistence mechanisms related to service control. So I'm going to go look in our logs to see what our logs currently look like. And I will find malicious things or benign things, and I will start to craft detections to match the malicious things. Now, if I find something malicious, I immediately, for me, I will talk to my SOC. So I have a different channel. I'll go in there. Hey guys, I found this thing. Here's the link to the record. Here's my thoughts on it. And they'll look at it and be like, yeah, this is something we're going to start writing a report and getting it out the door, and they'll handle it for me. If I was a detection response engineer, I found my own work, and I would go triage and begin doing that work as well. But a threat hunter is going to do the same thing. They're going to have that hypothesis. They're going to go hunt for it. If they find malicious, they're going to talk to the incident response of the analyst team to say, hey, I found this thing. What do you guys want to do with it? Threat hunters, of course, should be skilled enough to be able to triage it and handle that themselves. But again, it depends on the organization and the separation of duties and what resources are available where you can potentially pass that work off onto the appropriate team. If you're a smaller team, you're gonna do that work yourself. But detection engineering and threat hunting, very, very similar skill sets from a question perspective, as in, I think this is happening, I'm gonna go look for it. The goal is to be aware that it's happening and tell somebody. The other is to, I'm gonna write detection content so I don't have to run this query again. My rule will tell me when it happens. So detection engineering is a part of prevention. Threat hunting, not so much on the response. It's, I mean, yes, I guess I've never heard it really put like that, but I could see that. Threat hunting is, the assumption is all of our preventative controls failed to detect something, so the threat hunters are going to go manually and go audit. They're going to audit the environment to see, is this occurring, yes or no. Yep, and we do have a specific detection engineering course that goes way more in depth than the few labs we have here. You'll actually build out continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline, meaning you will write rules, you will run unit tests on the rules, they will deploy through automation to your SIM and run in a production environment that you can then run Atomic Red Team and validate your rules are working. So it mimics a real detection setup. Like if you don't have a detection team, you could take those skills and build your own detection pipeline and start deploying things at scale. Okay, so Atomic Red Team is up and running on our host. We're going to sort of jump into another lab now that we have Atomic Red Team working. So this was the Getting Started with Adversary Emulation. Please do the lab at your own pace. There's some examples of how to run some tests, how to get details, how to check prereqs. We're going to be doing that live together here in just a moment. So sort of skipping over that lab component since the next lab's going to have us doing it, and I'll just talk about it there. So we're going to be going into endpoint detections with Sigma HQ. So let me go back to this tab. And very quickly, we need to make sure our domain controller, victim machine, and our ELK machine are all up and running, which I've got. We're going to go to the Sigma GitHub repo. So I'm going to share this tab. So you should see this is the Sigma GitHub repo. We're going to go to rules. There's a lot here, so it's easy to get lost, but we're going to go to rules. And we're looking to detect events on the Windows operating system. So we're going to select Windows. And as you can see, there's a lot of different telemetry we could get from Windows. Driver events, DNS queries, creating remote threads. So this is like when applications will try to execute in another process. A lot of malware does that technique. We have PowerShell, name pipes, network activity, file events, files being created, deleted, modified. So there's a ton of different logs and detection opportunities here. It's frankly overwhelming when you get new to it. So all I can say is pick one thing and just put your blinders on. Don't try to read everything. I mean, there's literally thousands of rules here. It's too easy to get overwhelmed. But we're going to be looking in process creation. And again, this is a very big list of rules. And let me go look at the name. We should be looking for a name of proc creation win cert util certificate installation. That's a mouthful right there. So proc creation win cert util certificate installation. Let's see if we can find it. It should be alphabetical. Proc creation win. So we're in the A's, B's. So we're looking for cert util certificate installation. Let's click it. Yep. Proc creation wins cert util certificate installation. Okay. Woo. Say that 5 times fast. So let's talk about the Sigma spec. Sigma is just a standard that uses the YAML format. You could see the rule has the extension YML. That's telling us it's using YAML. YAML is the structure of the rule. Don't worry about what the words say, but there is a key and then there is a value. That is YAML. It's a way to mark up a config, right? That's all really this rule is. It's a configuration file that says this rule has a title, and the value of the title key is new root certificate installed via certutil.exe. It has a unique identifier. All Sigma rules must have a unique identifier in the form of a GUID. So you can just Google online GUID generator, and you can go to free GUID generator, generate some GUIDs, copy to clipboard, bam, you've got a GUID. GUIDs are globally unique identifiers. The chance of you generating a GUID that would match anything I would make is infinitesimally small. It's in billions and billions to one. So we would then, let me go back here. We would then paste in, and again, if we're writing our own rule, we would put our own GUID. You have this related object. So this rule, new certutil installed certutil, is related to these other rules. This rule is derived from this rule, meaning it's sort of taking on some of the derived behaviors, and it's sort of, you know, an extension of that previous rule, and this one is obsolete over this rule, so it obsoletes that rule. The status is this is in testing. There's experimental testing. Oh my gosh, I can't remember off the top of my head. We use our own at my day job, so apologies if I don't remember all of them. But we sort of have a modified Sigma format that we play with. We have a description. Descriptions are very important in detection engineering. Again, sort of the art and some of the science to it. It's very easy for us to write a title and a description that injects immense amount of bias. If I was like, malicious certificate installation, computer hacked, what is the SOC analyst going to do? They're more than likely going to say it's malicious and try to triage the host when it might be a false positive. So you have to strike that balance of priority without being, you know, you don't want to have that carrot too closest to the horse's mouth. You want to like try to point somebody in the right direction without telling them what the answer should be. And it's a very fine balancing act. We're actually having a discussion this past week about changing some of our verbiage to not bias our security operations team, because we do use terms such as malicious and suspicious in our rules, and we're trying to think about ways to do that. So there is, I was reading documentation on like psychology of words. I'm a detection engineer reading psychology material to help make my detections better. So that's why I like detection engineering. It's a lot of really random different things you might come up against and deal with. In our rules, we put references. This is super important, right? So imagine you're a SOC analyst and this alert comes in and you're like, all right, I'm reading the name. All right, okay, it's certutil. I read the description sort of telling me, you know, what this certutil thing is doing, but I still don't fully understand it. I don't really understand what that might look like, or why do I care? Well, I could go to the reference. Unfortunately, the reference they're using is to an atomic red team test. So that might not be the most verbose in telling them something. One of the things we do is we use Confluence, and I might write a Confluence article about general tradecraft and how it works, and we'll put our own internal private blog in our rules so an analyst can go read about our research, where we were like, hey, this is how persistence mechanisms work. These are the different kinds. Very much like what I had in the first topic we looked at. Here's the list of persistence mechanisms. This is how they're used. This is how we might triage them. Or if there's a reference to a binary, download the binary, run it in, you know, your threat intelligence, you know, reputation lookup to see if it's known malware. Very basic triage stuff. But that is to aid the analyst to help, you know, expedite them through the triage process, right? The faster and more we can help them by being succinct with our information, the better. And then we're going to sort of jump down a little bit into the really meaty part of this is this detection block. This whole block right here, we have, this is the main logic of this rule. Everything else is metadata about the rule, the severity, the priority, the date it was created, the date it was modified, the author, the description, all that stuff. That's great. We need to have all of that and be as succinct as possible. But really right here is where the rubber meets the road. So this is a term, you can name these whatever you want, but they're calling it selection image. They're looking for a process name of certutil or an original file name of certutil. So basically they're saying the event must be certutil, and the command line parameter must have add store, that must exist, and the CLI, selection CLI store, must have the command line contains the term root. So is certutil and has the parameter add store and has the term root. And our condition, which is telling us what to do, it's saying all of selection, it's wildcarding all these selection terms. So it's saying all of these together. So when this Sigma rule is converted into something we can use, it should output query syntax. So let's do that right now. I'm going to copy this rule, and I have this up. It's called Sigma. It's Sig converter. Sorry, Sig converter. I'm going to paste in that rule, and I'm setting our target to. We're using elk. I wanted to see if they had. There's Lucene. We'll set it to EQL. No, not EQL. What are we looking for here? Not ESQL. So open. I thought they had KQL, but we could go with Lucene. Lucene works. So effectively what we've done here is this tool took this big old rule with all these details and just turned it into the actual query we're going to use to go look for that activity on that host. And so you can see here, it took the image, the original file name, command line, and did some things. Now, this is very helpful to us because it converted this rule into something a little bit more tangible that we could go query. But unfortunately, the field names here, such as image and original file name, is not how our data is formatted. So we're going to need to modify this a little bit to make this work. And we'll be doing that here in just a moment. Let's go back to the lab and continue on with that process. Again, here in the lab, it breaks down and talks through, again, everything we just sort of touched on, a little bit more detail, again, using Sigma converter. And it then wants us to go to our elk instance. So we're going to go to our attacker machine. I have Kali up and running. Waiting for that browser to load. Any questions so far? I know we're throwing a lot. This is a very dense set of material.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions on like the Sigma and the rule creation? I know that's kind of new when you first see it. It's pretty much English, but is anyone unclear on the process of creating a Sigma rule as it is? Yeah, on target, Sino? Okay, good.
Oh, not Goog. So we're going to go to elk.goodcorp.lab at 5601, and that should get us to our elk instance.
So CI is looking for a quick recap. CI, what recap are you looking for? Which, like the past little bit, or kind of how we got to here?
Yeah, so to please clarify what you mean by recap, but I think if we're referring to just the Sigma rules, Sigma is a standard that relies on the YAML format. YAML has nothing to do with Sigma. Basically, the creators of the Sigma project were like, hey, I want to make a configuration file. Which markup language should we use? We could use JSON, we could use YAML, there's many others. And they said, we like YAML the most. So that's why Sigma are YAML-based files. YAML is a key value document type. So a key being title and the value being the title of a rule. What makes Sigma unique is that it defines effectively all the fields that must exist for it to be sort of like a qualified detector. Like, hey, if you answer all these questions and fill out all these fields, you've written a valid Sigma rule that you can then use in your production environment. I think one of the key takeaways for Sigma is that it is product agnostic. Sigma was designed not to be specific for one technology. So we didn't cover it. We used the online tool Sig Converter, but behind the scenes, you could go download that tool and run it locally on your machine, and it will convert a Sigma file to any output. I need to run a Splunk query. I need to run an Elk query. I want to do QRadar. I want to do name your poison. It will convert that rule into something that you can use in your target sim where you're going to run that query.
Nice. Cool. I'm just going to jump in there too, Greg, and say, Marsuvius, thanks for the raid. Thanks for bringing everyone in as well too. Looks like we just got a huge jump in the viewers. So hope your stream went well. Welcome to ours. Greg's just diving into detection engineering. We're going to do some live attacks here real soon.
Oh man, that last question is a doozy. Oh my goodness. What are the best practices for determining whether existing DE rules are outdated? So you're referring to like Sigma rules or just your rules in your environment. Can this process be automated to an extent? Oh man, that's the $1 million question. So as I was saying before, like regression testing. So I made a rule. I know a test that it should match, an atomic test or a custom test, whatever you made. And on a regularly occurring basis, I will run that rule against a test to see if it matches. We can automate that. That is a part of our CI/CD pipeline. Every time we push a new rule, it can run a test, and we can see the performance of it. And the performance could be as simple as did match or did not match. That is the clearest indicator that the rule isn't working. And you might think to yourself, well, why would a rule just not work all of a sudden? I work on a team with not a lot of people, about 6 of us, but we're all touching the different rules and making edits and changes and fixes. And it's very easy. It's human nature that, maybe we mistype something or change something. And there was an unintended effect of that rule not working as intended. So that is the clearest example, but a lot of trial and error, good metrics on your rules running and how they're performing, asking questions, never feeling good that your detections are good. Like I always have like I don't know what's the term I would use, like a PTSD in the back of my brain about my rules. Like I'm just waiting for somebody to be like, we didn't catch this thing and it was the worst incident ever. And you're always just sort of have that neurotic kind of irrational fear at times. Sometimes it's not irrational, and adversaries do a good number on things. But yeah, that's a good question. Your question alludes to the more mature teams who have a good handle on their processes, and they start to ask that question of themselves. And then it really is dependent on your organization and how they're set up. You've got to be able to, what data do we have available to us? What resources? That could be time, money, systems. Do I have access to run a new instance in the cloud to like compute this data? Can I automate my testing? Snap Attack, like I mentioned before, it does automated testing. So that's a platform you could do for that kind of testing, but it's not cheap. So I mean, it's you build it yourself. It might be free up front, but it's going to cost you in the end. Or you could go commercial and you're going to pay a lot more up front, but you have somebody else to yell at and tell them to fix it. So it's really, what do you guys want to do? Do you want to be responsible for fixing and maintaining, or do you want to put in tickets and yell at somebody else for fixing and maintaining it? It's going to be the same cost at the end of the day, it seems like. Bad question. Let's say an incident occurs that unfortunately leads to some form of loss. How does management determine who is at fault? Ooh, I can only imagine the finger pointing. Man, that's a good question. My gut reaction, honestly, if you work in an organization that immediately turns to finger pointing, that is already a telltale sign that that's going to happen more frequently, because that doesn't sound like an organization that is pragmatic about their resources and what is realistic. Hey, we hired 2 detection engineers. Why are we still getting hacked? Well, okay, talk to us in 9 months. We have to like onboard people. Like so far, I hope I've been passing on to you that detection engineering is more than just writing a rule. There's a lot that goes into it. And a lot of people who aren't familiar might just assume, well, we hired 2 detection engineers. Like, why aren't they just like saving the day all of a sudden? It's yeah, we could just write a bunch of rules, but like, are we going to burn out the SOC? Are we going to have lots of false positives? How do we validate those rules we spent all that time working are good? We have to spend more time to evaluate that. So more time evaluating, less time writing new rules. So at the end of the day, and it goes back to interpersonal communication, being very clear, documenting your processes, explaining to your leadership, giving them a clear understanding with clear goals. You want to pick audacious goals, something that is almost unobtainable, but a North Star that like we're gonna crunch and we're gonna work towards that. But if they're in the dark and they don't know how you work, and then there's an incident, yeah, people start pointing fingers because it's human nature, right? People are risk. Well, not risk. They're dealing with an incident. You know, people are stressed. They're can be short-tempered. You know, they're gonna start externalizing their anger towards other people. It's unfortunate human behavior, and the only saving grace is documentation, documentation, documentation. A good portion of a detection engineer's time is writing up why we're researching, why we're writing that rule, what is the justification of the rule, how did the rule perform, what tests did we run. You have all of that documentation for a rule. You then deploy the rule and see how well it performs when the SOC tells you this rule sucks, this rule has too many false positives, this rule, you know, or this rule is great, it's finding hackers, it's easy to triage, great work. You get the full spectrum. And this is why being a detection engineer, you need to have thick skin, because you work on producing a product that everybody is going to critique. It is the nature of the business. There's not many people where like everything you make, somebody's going to be like, that's a piece of shit. You know, like that is security detection engineering by design. It is a process designed to be critiqued. And if you're not critiquing it, somebody else is going to critique it. So you want to be the most, I don't want to say negative, but you want to be very realistic about your capabilities and always improving and always trying to get better, because it's a lot easier for you to say why your baby is ugly than somebody else saying it, you know?
I think that last example got the point home. Nice.
No, absolutely. Because we do. And the reason we do is because it's a well-known, understood framework. There's no really other frameworks that exist like it. So alternatively to MITRE, what would I use? I'd have to make something up. And I'm not a proponent for making things up. I want to make what exists better, but I don't want to do it at the cost of like Greg's proprietary, super secret, custom lexicon of terms. Like that's a nightmare. Like now I'm not even doing detections. Now I'm like, well, what does this term mean over this term? Like, how do we feel? Like, no. No. I can make a request to MITRE. I could provide them evidence and they can make the change if they choose to or not, but that's not on me. I can work within their landscape without having that be it. Like, I don't want to burden myself with extra stuff is really what I'm saying. Like, I've already got enough going on. I don't want to own something like that. Now, I will digress and say, working at our company, we do have our own contextual labels, but that's for the SOC, right? Like, I make a detection, and to me, it's true or it's false, right? Like that's at the end of the day, that's the metric I care about most. The SOC is concerned, was this a pen test? Was this a red team? Was this benign administrative activity? Is this a business accepted risk? They have a lot of context, how they sort of mark up the rules or the alerts that they observe and triage that don't really pertain to me. Like that, those metrics are good. I do want to know if this is a business accepted risk or if it's a benign true positive or it's pen testing, because we could say like, hey, we're really good at detecting pen tests for this tradecraft, but why aren't we detecting actual adversaries? That's a good question. Like, did we focus on the tradecraft pen testers use and not what actual adversaries are doing? Is that a knowledge gap, or adversaries not using it? There's a lot of unknowns there, right, that we have to try to solve, and a lot of the time we don't have an answer for it. If we haven't seen an adversary do it, we might not know, or it might just not be happening more. When a detection engineer leaves your organization, would you have them sign an NDE, non-disclosure E? I don't know what that exempt. I don't know what the E would be for, but no, we don't. No. I mean, you have them. I mean, taking your detection content with them would be a violation of their employment, and there's usually like an intellectual property statement when you're hired, right? So you don't want to copy your own GitHub repo and take it to your next place of employment. But the place I work for is really forward leaning, and truth be told, if you learn something on the job, that's a skill set you have. You can't partition your brain like that. You can't not go somewhere else and be like, hey, I know about this thing we should be really aware of, like, and here's how we should do it, right? Like if it comes to source code or something that's copyrighted, there's clear delineations there. But if you're talking about logic and how an adversary does something, well, that's just something you know now. You can't just turn that off. Like, you don't want to be the detection engineers like, oh, I totally knew how we could have stopped that, but you know, my NDA. Like, no, nobody's gonna be cool with you operating like that. Okay, so we're in Elastic. You're gonna go there with elk.goodcorp.lab5601. The username password is Elastic. So Elastic username, Elastic password. 99% of my time in Elastic, I live in Discover. And we should see some logs here because my victim machine is up and running. So my victim machine is sending telemetry as it's just sitting there idling away. Let's go back to this lab here really quick. So I'm just going to quickly show you an example. We ran this certutil. It gave us this command line here, right? But when we run it in Elk, we get an error. And it really boils down to that our fields we're using in Elk do not match what was in the original rule. So if we go down here, we can see here is an appropriate or modified one. So you can see instead of image, it's process name certutil or process.pe original file name is certutil. And really what this boils down to is Elastic uses the Elastic Common Schema, ECS, for all their field names. And the Sigma converter just converted the names as it is. In the Sigma convert, you can provide a mapping of your Elk rules, but that's beyond what we're trying to get through today. Very quickly, you could just go down here and you can copy this command. We're going to go back to our attacker machine, and I'm going to run this query. And we got no results, which makes sense. We haven't ran anything on that machine. So what we're going to do is we're going to look right here, and we can see that they want us to run an atomic test. We're going to be running this again on our victim machine where we set up atomic test. So let me clarify what's happened to date. We have our victim machine. We installed Atomic Red Team. We set up a profile so that Atomic Red Team will be available as a module every time we open our PowerShell terminal. If you guys reset your VMs, you'll need to go do that profile thing because that profile will not persist if you reset your VM. We then went and found a rule in the Sigma repo, the upstream, the official Sigma project. We went to the Windows process creation rule, and we found that certutil installing a certificate rule. We converted it. Hey, the converter did a great job of getting a general syntax, but there were some field mismatches. We fixed that. There's an example in the lab with the converted one, so you can sort of compare and contrast yourself to see. Again, look in the logs and see what the field names are in the logs to say, okay, I just gotta, find and replace some of these field names. It's not too hard. Just take your time and read through them. We're then now that we've got that query loaded, we're going to go back and we're going to run a test. We're going to actually emulate this event happening And we're going to see what that looks like on our logs. And we're going to furthermore see, does our query match that event, right? And effectively what we've done is we've done a very basic detection evaluation. We've created a parameter, some logic to match an event. We emulated an event, and we're going to see if we get a result. So I'm going to copy this test. We're going to be running invoke atomic test T. So this is technique 1533.004. So .004 is the procedure. And we're running this hyphen check prereqs, right? So the cool thing about Atomic Red Team is sometimes it might need like a legitimate tool, like a hack tool on your Windows machine, and it's not there because it's a vanilla Windows install. We don't have any cool, sexy hacker tools there. So Atomic Red Team will actually, via check prereqs, download the tools and stage them so it can automate an attack on your workstation. So it will download at times some pretty malicious tools. So you always want to make sure your AV is turned off and things, because your antivirus will flag a lot of the tests that Atomic Red Team will run. So let's go to our victim machine. I'm gonna then, and I ran that atomic test, and it says prerequisites. So it says prerequisites were not met. Try installing prereqs with get prereqs. We did try installing prereqs, and prerequisites are met. So you can see at the very end. So it just sort of gives you the output of like, hey, it's not here, we're trying, and it's successful in that one command. So now we have a root certificate was added to the user certificate store, which we need. So now this attack is ready to go. So I'm just going to clear my screen. I'm going to go up once, and I'm going to remove the check prereqs. When we hit enter, this is actually going to run the attack now. Done executing test, install root certificate on Windows, executing test. It says there's some kind of an error. The command failed. Error, file not found. So it's having an issue with the file. So again, these tests are open source. Sometimes we might need to tweak it and tune it, but not to worry, because it attempted to run the command. Even though the command wasn't successful, we should still see in our logs the attempt to run the command. And the attempt is what it would look like legitimately. So even though the test failed, it more than likely was successful from a logs and detection perspective. So let's go back to our attacker machine, and let's run this query again, and let's see if there's any results there. It might take, okay, cool. That was quick. So I'm going to clean up this data because it's really chunky, right? We don't want to see some very specific things. So I want to see the process name. So there we go, nice and clean, cert util. And let's look at the process command line. And I can drag this guy over a little bit. And so we could see here the command. So we have cert util running the command add store, and then there's that root. Remember, if you remember our rule, the rule was simply saying cert util and hyphen add store and the term root being in the URL in the thing. And all three conditions exist here. So even though we know this test didn't work for whatever reason, the test couldn't find the file and it borked itself. From a log perspective, we got our intended event, and our rule effectively matches it. We now are detecting this event occurring. Now, this brings up another good point. This is something that a lot of junior detection engineers struggle with, or even SOC analysts. We see this event, cert util ran add store with a root certificate. Hey, this might be something suspicious. We saw it ran, but we know that this isn't a false positive because it's a true thing we're wanting to intend to match. But operationally, the attack didn't work. It failed. We're not seeing those failures in our logs, so we're blind to that failure. So this is an instance where a detection would work. A SOC analyst would look at it, and they would remote into the host, and they'd be like, oh, something bad. I'm going to go look for that certificate. And they would be like, the certificate isn't here. What is happening? Something's wrong. This is where you want to go check PowerShell logs. If you looked at the PowerShell logs, you would have seen the output that said this failed. Otherwise, a junior analyst might spend a lot of time triaging a host, thinking like, oh, they're hiding this root certificate. They did something. They changed something. You'd be going down that rabbit hole when it never worked, right? So a more senior analyst might quickly go check, error logs and things like that. Hey, did this event actually happen? We see it was attempted, but it wasn't successful. We still need to do something about the attempt, but at least the severity, it's not as bad as it could be because it was unsuccessful. I feel Anthony, it looks like you wanted to say something.
No, I was just adjusting, getting my posture. I had to
man.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, but no, it was more just a posture change around. I think Abby's got a question though.
Yeah, Abby's ton of good questions. Are detection rules specific to a set of machines, servers, workstations? If so, it may affect the scalability of the rules. Any concerns valid? Absolutely. So if we go, let's see if it's in this rule. So we can see here product windows. So one thing, and I'll talk about, it might be a little bit convoluted. I'll talk about how we do it at work. That's a little sexy. But if I go back to our attacker machine, let's look at the logs again. And I'm going to open up this one log event. I just want to look at the raw data. And let's see if it has OS present. So host OS type. So it's not giving us any good host information. So, okay. So where I work, we have our own proprietary EDR, and it does parse not just like the platform Windows. It'll tell you that this is server 2009, whatever version. It'll give us the version number. So I have very specific host information about the version and the platform type. So I can clearly see workstation versus server kind of install. So what we do, we built our own custom detection engine. We don't use Elk, as Elk can be used as a detection. We used to use Elk, but we went and built our own. But basically what we do is whenever we write a rule for the platform, like a Windows workstation, whenever our rules are being pushed into production, right? So imagine we have a GitHub repo with 1,000+ rules, and every time we do a production push, it's like evaluating, testing all of them, bundling them up to go send them over to the detection engine. What it does is it bundles them based on platform. Our deployment pipeline looks at the rules and says, these are Mac detections, these are Linux detections, these are server windows, this is workstation windows. So what happens is when an event comes in our data, you have, hey, this is Windows Server. So the server rules only run against the server, the workstation only against the workstation, the Mac only against the Mac. For the purpose you identified, scalability, every rule is a query against that record. That is compute cycles, that is memory, that is processor time, and anything we do that adds unnecessary processor memory latency puts pressure on our architecture, right? So again, if we have 1,500 rules, we don't need to run all 1,500 rules against every version of everything if the vast majority of them are not applicable. So you said there's 3 events here, and
I was just kind of clarifying, with what Karina was asking.
Yeah, so there's 3 events because by default, Elastic is collecting the event logs from their EDR, and it's also collecting start and stop events. So we have multiple things here. So if we go to event, if I could spell, and what was event? Maybe it's event action. So we have process creation, and then you have start and end. So if I remove end, we lost one, right? And then if I go to event action and I only want process creation, I'm down to 1. It's just a matter of duplicate records. The sensors, we have multiple sensors collecting and observing the same event, which can be a little bit confusing from a log analysis perspective, but from a detection and coverage perspective, that's really good. What if the EDR agent failed? Well, we're still collecting event logs. We could still see the same events. Maybe not the same depth of detail. The EDR might be more sophisticated and provide more details, but like at the end of the day, our basic detections will always work because we have multiple sensors collecting the same thing. The burden of that is we're now maintaining multiple data sources, and we're also paying for the doubling, tripling of storing that data, right? Storage does come at a cost. So Sysmon as well, good point. Yeah, so Sysmon, start-stop events. Sysmon is what's collecting our event logs and the Elastic EDR. So now we have one true event. So we could have done in our rule where we could have said, and event.action process creation, right? So we could have been more specific in our query. Let's do that. And event.action process creation, I think it was. And we're going to run that. We should still have,
I think, wait, go back to the, event action. I think it's just EVE you put.
Oh, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I can't spell. I misspelled something. Let me remove it.
Yeah, let it auto-populate.
Stop doing that. And event.action process creation. Oh, it's just process creation. There's no underscore. That's what it was. And event.action process. And then there we go. Just like Anthony said with the good, wise decision, let's let the system do it for me because, Greg, you can't spell and apparently read. So I can now remove these other filters and bam, we now have a log qualifying parameter that ensures we get one match, because now the SOC would be really pissed if they got 3 matches for every detection, right? They're like, I don't want to see start and stop and process. Like, pick one, like let's be clear about which one you want me to look at. So there we go.
Yeah. And then I think, Karina, like kind of going back to what you're saying there, now we have to figure out, like, are we dealing with false positives or not? Right. Like now we need to get to triage. We need to get to security detection.
So there is, in my, I'm probably an outlier on this purview. A lot of people consider false positives as it doesn't find malicious. And to me, that is logically inaccurate. That is an emotional response to, I work in a SOC and I want to only find malicious things, and detection should only find malicious things. Well, if that's what your SOC wants, we can certainly deliver that. That is something a detection engineer can do. But let's be clear here. A false positive is when the rule does not match an intended result, right? So we could have made this rule, and what if this matched a different kind of cert command? What if root was in another parameter that also used add store, and it wasn't exactly this I was looking for? What if I got unintended matches? To me, that is a false positive. I am falsely matching things that I intended to. My rule said it's a positive match, but the SOC validated, hey, you're not matching what you intend to match. Now, that's a whole different discussion from malice. Is this malicious? Is this benign? So I want you guys to start thinking about true positive and false positive strictly on, does the rule match what it intended to match? We wanted to match this command. We matched it. It's right here. And here's the discussion you have with your SOC. Does your SOC care? The SOC might say, well, this is a false positive. What they're really telling you is, we don't, and pardon my French, we don't give a shit about this alert. We don't care, right? So that's easy for me. I'll remove this rule. I'll disable it. I'll put it in my back burner. Maybe we can do it later, right? If they don't want to look at it. So there's a difference between malicious and benign and true and false. This truly matched this positive event, but is it benign or malicious? That's a completely different discussion. The SOC are the ones who are going to determine malice. So if they say this is not malicious, okay. And they could say 80% of the time, this is not malicious when it alerts. And then we can have a discussion to say, is the 20% of the time that it was malicious worth it? Is it worth triaging 80% of the time to get 20% of the success? And if they say, yeah, it's annoying, but we do want to alert on these, then there might not be a lot I can do for them. I might just be like, sorry, you have to triage 80% of garbage to find 20% of the diamonds in the rough. Having our own proprietary EDR, I would start talking to my product researchers and saying, is there, if the analyst is doing this if the analyst is doing this triage of this event, can the agent do that triage? Can the agent do an analytic that validates this so my detection true positive ratio goes up much higher, or my malice score goes up higher, more malicious matches versus benign matches. So you can use technology. We could use automations. Maybe we buy a SOAR platform. So instead of having a human look at it, because, hey, this is 80% of the time it's noise, 20% of the time it's gold. Every time that alert fires, I'm going to have my SOAR pipeline look at the log, use the API to task that file, run the file in some online, intelligence reputation store to give me that, like, this is malicious, this is not malicious. If it is malicious, now tell the analyst to respond to it. So we can automate some of that benign, annoying work away from the analysts if you are having that good discussion and discourse about what your detection is attempting to do versus the result versus the SOC's intended goal. We can find a sweet spot there. Absolutely. The false positive does not mean not useful. Another good example, if you're a SOC analyst and I say this host is compromised and there's 200,000 records, do you want to look at 200,000 records or 200 alerts on the host? Because we write what we call priority 4 informational alerts. I'll write alerts that are just like an RDP session happened. Somebody copied something from a clipboard. It's benign trash. You wouldn't want to triage these on day in, day out. But if you know the host is compromised, it reads like a narrative now. Somebody remoted in. Somebody ran a command with PowerShell. So it's all this benign, low-level quality stuff. But when you know that account is compromised, that is all gold. Those are all reportable events because it's the adversary, tradecraft, and steps. A lot of things adversaries do look benign and legitimate. And you don't know it's malicious until you know the account or the computer is compromised. And it's that chicken or the egg thing. We can't look at all the alerts because they don't look malicious. But when we do know a host is compromised, we got to go back and look at all the alerts because those alerts did match malicious activity, right? And that's, again, I know I'm sort of going on a tangent here, but what makes malware? I didn't want it here. That's what makes it malware. Even if it doesn't do anything inherently malicious, the fact that it installed itself on my computer, I could say that's malicious. That by definition is malware. It's doing something I don't want it to do on my environment, and I perceive it as a security risk. It's malware. Or a potentially unknown or potentially unwanted product, a pub. Another organization might not consider it malware. They might not be bothered by it. It's really dependent on your perspective and your interpretation, right? So that goes into detection engineering, perceptions and expectations of the SOC and the people triaging. And what, again, going back to the organizational goals, what do you guys consider severe? What do you consider benign and dumb? All right, we can operate within those parameters. But if you're not communicating and you're just making rules, you're going to piss people off because they're going to be like, this is trash. I don't want this. And you're like, I spent 2 weeks making all this stuff, and they're like, trash. Like, you don't want to be in. I've been there. You don't want to go through that. Communicate. Say, we want to do this. We're thinking about this. What are your thoughts? Like, oh, that's not important to us. The SOC will say, for the past month, we've been dealing with these intrusions, and this is what is hurting us. And you're like, oh, I wasn't even aware. Cool, we'll start researching that and make new detections. And they're like, thank you so much. You want to support them, and you do that through communication. We're running down the wire here on time. Okay, so we installed Atomic Red Team. We emulated a test. We checked prereqs, and we ran a query in Elk and validated that our query finds the intended match. So let's quickly go through and turn this into a rule that we can use. So going back here, I'm going to copy my command. I'm not going to do that event action process creation. We can add that later, but let's just simplify this for now. We're going to go to this hamburger menu, and we're going to go down to security, and there's an entry for rules. So once we're here, oh, they changed this up on me. I'm learning. Okay, so we have rules, add integration, ML jobs, nope. Detection rules, SIM. Okay, cool. Before they used to have a button up here on the right that said manage rules. So now it looks like it's under detection rules, SIM. So we're going to click the detection rules and hopefully that's what I'm looking for. It is. All right, now they moved it here, create new rule. So we're going to create a new rule. We're going to turn our query we just tested into a rule. We're going to use what's selected here. I know my screen here's a little wonky here, but we're going to do a custom query. It's selected. We're going to come on down, and there's a lot of logs here. No need to check all of them. We're just looking for this one that just says logs hyphen wildcard. We just need to run against that one because that's where, in this instance, in this lab, all of our victim machine data is just going to this general logs location. We're going to then paste in our query just as we did before. So that's a query we already know works. So all we're doing here is this is just a canned query. We manually ran a query. We manually ran the test. All we're doing now is just saying, hey, could you just run this on a schedule for me? It's like creating a cron tab on Linux and just putting a parameter to say, hey, when you boot up or you do this or this event happens, just do this action. That's all we're doing here. We're going to go down and we're going to go to continue. And again, here's some of the things we have to do about the rule. I'm just going to call this certutil certificate installation. And I'm just going to write tests. But again, remember how important it is. We need to not invoke bias. We need to be clear. One of the things I like to do is I like to sort of format my descriptions is, what is this? How is it used? How is it used maliciously? So when I write out I would say like certutil is a tool used to manage certificates, blah, blah, blah. It's used by administrators and applications to manage certificates, and this is how it works. And then I would say adversaries also use it for suspicious or malicious file downloads, file execution, and like manipulating and installing malicious certificates. So now so the reader gets the understanding of like what is a legitimate use of the tool, what are some example use cases, and how might it be used maliciously. Severity, I'm going to go with low. This isn't anything like groundbreaking like alerts. So again, severity is subjective to your organization. What does your organization consider severe? What do you consider low, not important? You can put in custom tags if you like, but we're just going to click continue. I want this to run, by default, it runs every 5 minutes. We're going to have it run every minute because, again, I'm testing this. And to Abby's question previously, if we run all of our rules every minute and we have, 1,000 rules, and we're ingesting, say, 5 million logs for every hour, our elk instance isn't going to be too snappy. It's going to run pretty darn slow. We're going to have to start spending more money to increase our cluster size so it can handle these queries, because we're effectively running 1,500 queries every 5 minutes against millions of files, right? That's going to be pretty brutal for the system. So it can get expensive, even though you can get Elastic free and open source. The cost of running it at scale can be expensive. And our rule actions, we could do cool things like we can have it send a notification to Slack or send the alert to a ticket system where we actually respond to tickets. But for this example, we're not doing anything. We're not sending it anywhere, and we're going to create and enable that rule. So it should take us to the rule page right here. And we can see there's a trend and there's nothing found. So let's go back to our victim machine. I'm going to do cleanup. And so it cleaned up from our previous test. We always want to run our cleanups. I'm just going through. We're going to rerun our prereqs. So we're staging for the test again. Remember, it's probably going to fail because it can't find the file. And it looks like it's putting in a temp root, a temp folder. So we would probably need to go look at the test source code to see like why it's not finding it. But that's beyond today. But we can run the test again. And it got the failure, but we know from our previous example, it ran the intended command we want to match. So from like a testing our detection and what it looks like in the logs, we can feel comfortable knowing that our detection is matching the intended behavior and patterns. Even though it wasn't successful, it will still alert us when somebody tries to do that. So let's go to here. And a really hack way to do this, if I disable this rule and enable it, it just reruns the rule immediately. So it's data probably wasn't sent from the victim machine yet. I'll just keep refreshing that a few times. Any questions while we're waiting? This might take a minute as data needs to flow from our victim machine to here and so on and so forth. Okay, what was the last question?
Scroll further up. Actually, yeah, there was one.
I'm certain that detection rules are part of audits from a GRC, particularly the compliance perspective. How do you manage compliance in the area as a detection engineer or DE manager? Any recent examples for your current organization that you can share? I'm certain that detection rules are part of audits from a GRC perspective. No, our business has gone through like SOC, the GDPR, things like that, and they've never approached our team, and we're compliant. So GRC would be more interested in who has access to the logs, how are they audited, how are they onboarded, and how do you retain and maintain the privacy of those logs. If that is validated and compliant, they don't really care how you're querying the logs because those are independent use cases. And in other words, to put it, how would a auditing body qualify like compliant detections? Right? Imagine an instance where that reality was true and adversaries knew what the audit policy was. So adversaries just started running attacks and doing things that were out of scope of what I'm allowed to do with the data from a detection engineering perspective. Like I could literally see the attacks, but I'm legally not allowed to run the detection rules against the content to match it. Right? So rightfully so, auditing should be more about how is the data collected? How is privacy maintained? Who has access? What are the security controls around that access? How do you encrypt and protect the information from theft? But the use case of how the data is used, yeah. I mean, I would also think like in HIPAA talks about the disclosure of health information by healthcare providers, but it's not specific to say what a doctor can and can't do with your medical record. Doctors are allowed to write anything they want in your medical record. It might be a career ending if they write something inappropriate or something non-professional, right? That's an HR problem. But as long as they're not disclosing your records to an unintended or unauthorized party, they're not in violation of that audit control, if you will. I hope that answers the question. That's anything that I have. That's nothing I've really come across myself. So something is not working right. Let's go back. Let's go test ourselves here. I might have, just going through this really quick, I might have just fat fingered because we're getting two matches here. The one is at the bottom of the hour and the one almost near the end of the stream. So the data is going here. I probably fat fingered something when creating the rule. So just take your time when you're working in there. And the reason I wanted to get this point, if we have just 1 minute, even though my example didn't work out too. Oh, there. Okay, apparently didn't like it. It's working. All right.
Yeah, it's working.
I don't know. Again, Elk was having a little gremlin in there and wasn't showing me anything. So, okay, it's working. I'm good. I know what I'm doing. I'm great. Don't worry. Bring my confidence back. I can't even get a basic rule to work. So Elk wasn't playing nice, even though I was enabling and re-enabling it. All right, so really quick going back to, this goes through exactly what I just did, how to make a query. I talk through the descriptions, reference URLs. I ask you to fill out information. I give you an example, right? So I had a much more verbose thing here. And it sort of follows my, what is it? How is it used? How adversaries use it? An example here being, detects execution of cert-util with the add store flag in order to install new certificate on the system. Adversaries may install a root certificate on a compromised system to avoid warnings when connecting to adversary-controlled web servers. Right? So again, how is it used legitimately? How can it be used potentially maliciously? I'm not leading the reader to any one assumption, but I'm providing both sides of the coin. So here again, you can see everything. I added all the MITRE attack techniques. We added authors. So again, follow along in the lab. You have a great example. The one thing I want to talk to you about is not my quiz. No, not the quiz here. Let me go back to chapters. So this challenge is doing what we just did manually, but you guys will be taking on the role of an adversary. You will be running effectively your own little pen test using malware. What happens is you'll be on your attacker machine. You'll create a netcat listener on port 8080. You'll go to your victim machine and you'll go to your browser and download this. This is an HTA. This is a hypertext. This is an HTML application. But what it is it's really a windows.exe binary masquerading as an HTA file. And if you run this, it actually runs a reverse shell. It runs malware that connects back to your attacker machine. So what we do in this lab is we're going to stop, review, and detect. This is the process of how we test and evaluate building detections. This is what I do at my day job. This is real sort of process in tradecraft. I mean, there's, of course, again, a lot more to it, the interpersonal communication and teaching and managing and metrics and performance and tuning. But when we're making a brand new rule, this is what we do. So we stop, review, and detect. I need to fix that because we're not on a team. You're going to be doing individually. But what you're going to do is you're going to run this. You're going to run this HTA. You're doing it on your victim machine. Everything that happens from this execution is in ELK. You could go now look in ELK and see what the logs look like. You will then craft a detection to match that, right? So one could be an HTA that also has a EXE. So show me any process name where HTA and EXE are in the same name. That's suspicious. That's a detection rule right there all by itself. We then are going to make a temp folder. We're going to run a PowerShell command. We're doing this from the attacker machine now because remember, the attacker machine has a remote connection to the victim machine. We've compromised them. We've hacked them. So we're now going to run a command to install our Windows update. We're setting up a persistence mechanism. So we're staging the file and the C user's public temp, that Windows update. We're then creating the scheduled task to run that thing. So you could even reboot your VM and the connection will come back. You'll see you'll get a new connection. So you now have persistence. We'll then run some enumeration commands from the attacker machine. We're going to be looking at the domain, who the users are, their privileges. And again, at each of these stages, you will stop, you will review these commands, and you'll write detections for them. You'll run the commands manually. You'll see if it found it, and you can rerun, as the attacker, you can just rerun these commands as many times as you want. And then you'll write your rule, save your rule, rerun the command. And does your rule match? Does it alert? So when you get done with this lab, you will have rules for like host enumeration, malicious HTA execution. You'll have cert-util, malicious downloading, installing a remote management tool. AnyDesk is a legitimate tool, but a lot of hackers use it for remote access. So they're installing AnyDesk. We could see them setting a password 123. Again, more malicious cert-util downloading, installing a tool called adfind to go enumerate the domain controller, setting a new user called win update service with the password 123, adding them to the administrators group. So they're trying to make a new user and add them to the administrators group. And then downloading another malicious tool, downloading Mimikatz, trying to dump passwords from the host. So like, if you do this lab and you go through, you will learn about some common adversary tactics and tradecraft, some common hack tools. I see these hack tools almost on a daily basis. AdFind is used by ransomware actors every day. These are legitimate tools. We're seeing AnyDesk used by scammers, ransomware folks, initial access brokers. They're all using this for command and control. Mimikatz is still used today to dump and steal credentials. So like going through this lab, you're going to research, you're going to do some threat hunting in the logs. You're going to craft some queries to match you want to get to match that one record. You don't want to get 5 matches, get that one match. Then go, just like the previous lab, and go build that rule in Elk and test the rule by rerunning the attack and seeing if the rule matches. At the end of this, you should have 10 to 20 rules of your own detection stuff. You will be able to talk through a full junior detection engineer lifecycle at a very rudimentary level. And that is all I was hoping to cover today, and 3 minutes over. So dang.
Pretty good.
My goal.
Pretty good. I mean, that was pretty dense. A lot of content. How do you enable dark mode on
the real questions right here? Yeah. So I will show you really quick. Go to management. You're going to go to stack management.
Oh, wait, go back and share your screen again.
Oh,
it's still showing the. Yeah, there you go.
So you're going to go to the hamburger menu. You're going to go all the way bottom to management. We're going to go to stack management. And I think it's advanced settings under Kibana. And I'm going to search here dark mode. And you're going to click enabled. So hamburger, management, advanced stack management, advanced settings, and then at the top you could just search dark and you'll get the dark mode and you can click enabled. Any other questions?
Yeah, cool. Well, say this much, Greg, very, very well timed execution and content delivery. I think a lot of students are really, it's hard for them to imagine and visualize what a detection rule looks like. They hear a lot about it. And I think just demonstrating really like you just grabbed your search filter, which you students have learned in SOC 100-2. You've learned how to use ELK to perform queries and search for IOCs and IOAs, looking for patterns, sifting through logs. All what Greg has done over here is he's taken it further, right? He's thought about threat actor patterns, the attack lifecycle, what it could indicate when we see this thing live. And then he's taken that, and then he's just taken the filter that you search with and then created a rule with it. So you're almost there. Like the students of you that are just getting started now and getting through the triage skill set, which includes ELK or a SIM, you can see, right? Like I hope Greg has been able to sort of demystify it a little bit, pull the curtains and say like, it's not the most craziest thing. It's complicated, but it's not that far out of reach. I hope you guys are getting that.
Yeah. I think if you're interested in detection engineering, like this content right here can get you functional at a rudimentary level to talk about detection engineering. You can potentially interview if you have some other skills to sort of reinforce it. But what I think that the key takeaway I'd want to sort of impart is it's pretty straightforward to detect and write rules for the things you think are important. It's a thing entirely when you work in an organization and you're solving other people's problems and their needs, and you're operating within those parameters and those timelines that make it difficult. And then the whole part of engineering in the title is we engineer solutions. It's right here. This is just rule development. There's nothing in here that's engineering yet. We're not using GitHub. We're not doing detection as code. We don't have a deployment pipeline. We're not running automated unit tests and regression. Those are things I do in my job that we have not covered today. We cover it in the death course, and you get exposure to the more realistic process. But the thing that's ultimately hard to emulate in any course is the environmental and organizational responsibilities you have as a detection engineer. You have to help other teams be successful, And if I was left to my own devices, we'd probably have 5,000 rules in the same amount of time to get our 1,400. But those are 1,400 hard-fought rules that provide value that the company is trying to solve. They're trying to solve very specific things, and it's at odds at times with the things I think are important. And that's fine, right? We all have different perspectives and different understandings of risk and value. But at the end of the day, I'm not triaging my own signals, so I can't. If I wanted to really get on my high horse, they would just say, okay, you could write all the rules you want, but you're triaging them. And then I'd be like, well, then I wouldn't have time to do all the other stuff. And they're like, exactly. If you want us to look at them, you have to work and collaborate with us as a team. And we've never had that ultimatum. I'm just giving you an example what it would be in an extreme, but that's what I think makes this job exciting and also challenging, is not only are we learning about threats and the changes and the adversaries and the hacks, that's cool, but we're actually providing value and we're helping security actually solve things. If we do a bad job, everybody else is having a bad time. If we do a good job, we're making other people's lives better. And we ebb and flow between those two. Again, thick skin is and always having that North Star, that goal. What is our audacious goal? To improve our team, our coverage, our metrics, our performance of our rules, and ultimately the value we provide other teams so that they could be successful is what detection engineering, in my opinion, is all about.
Very succinct. I hope that gives some more clarity as well, too, and insight. What Greg's trying to describe there, right? Yeah, I think that's really one of the biggest challenges. It's beyond detection engineering too, right? It's the business processes and integrating security into the business, getting buy-in, making it work. That's where it really gets hard.
Yeah.
I
mean, exactly. At my work, I provide detections to a security team, but we are managed detection and response provider for other businesses. So, not only do I write rules that my analysts, my internal team that I know, and I know what their capabilities are, how they'll review it, but I also know customers who might not have any security background are reading my rule names and my rule descriptions. So, I can't write this is malicious, no cap, right? I have to write things in a way that provides information to the analyst, but also is informative for a customer to understand why are they receiving this. And it is weird to, on one hand, I could have the SOC saying this rule's awesome, but then customers are like, this sucks. And it's how do you balance those? It's not easy, and it's not the engineering part of this job. It's a lot of the soft skills.
Yeah, it's so important. Cool. Any other burning questions here from chat? Anything you want to have Greg talk about a little bit more? Maybe recap a concept or two, or I think honestly, any SOC analyst that could just go through this module alone and then go to an interview or go to their next performance interview, I think you would definitely impress your listener just being able to talk about this module alone.
I'm the hiring manager for our team. I have been, and I review resumes. We're always open to people from different walks of life. We're not always looking for traditional, you had 5 years of experience for an entry-level position, none of that nonsense. But if you go through these labs and really study them and practice them, and again, you have Atomic Red Team now. You can emulate effectively any tactic and technique there's a test for. There's nothing stopping you guys from learning a great deal of how adversaries operate. And if you can speak confidently to that, I'll show you how I run Atomic Red Team. I'll show you how I craft my query in ELK to find the event of interest. I'll show you how I write a rule and I provide a name and a description, and how I do the MITRE mapping. If you practice that, just even a couple hours of tinkering around with that, and you get comfortable speaking to that, people would take you serious if you applied for, a very junior detection role. If we hired a junior detection person on my team, they probably wouldn't be making a bunch of rules on their own. They would be paired up with a senior analyst to sort of review their work. All of our work gets reviewed before it gets released into production anyways. But we would have our analysts going through and helping systemically improve a lot of our detection content. There'd be a lot of exposure and awareness types tasking and work to get them sort of spun up on how we do business and how we operate before we're like, all right, go make rules, have fun, kind of a thing. So do we teach DE in CDA Live? We don't have detection engineering content in CDA Live, I believe, right? So it's this course, and then we have the detection engineering. Yeah, we have the death course that's separate. But we used to do 1 week of log analysis, and it just wasn't enough. So now it's 2 weeks, but we didn't add any new content. So you're going to have me for 2 weeks. We're just going to be an elk. We can write detections. We can write rules. It's going to be all about querying, hunting. We will have atomic red team. So basically what we did here today, we could do for 2 weeks until, to your heart's content, until I want to make sure everybody's really comfortable with querying, hunting, writing rules. So yes, we will. It's not officially in there, but during that time, you guys can ask for whatever you want, and we'll knock it out.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've also had some internal talks about doing kind of like an advanced, kind of like a 2-day detection engineering kind of live course that we can take further from the CDA training and such, where it's just purely this, but on steroids, and just focused and getting you all hands-on, and getting live feedback. Greg attacking you. Greg will attack you himself, and then you need to sort of like defend it. So I think we've got some things.
I would imagine it would be the first couple hours would be basically what we just did, and then would pivot into more of a detection and response, where we would emulate the attacker, run the attack, we would write the rules, and then we would be the SOC analyst to go triage the hosts and validate, did this run success? Like we were talking about before, did this attack actually run? We would go look at the logs, it failed. So we would do the full life cycle of detection and response and adversary emulation probably for 2 days. We could do that. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Attack and defense. Cool.
Yeah. It was always it was packed too tightly in there. We just added a week to just let it ruminate.
Nice. Based on the course. Good to have you with us. Yeah, Karina loves detection engineering. It's true. It's interesting.
Yeah, for all of those reasons, that's why I love it the most. Yeah. Every week is something different.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for spending another Saturday with us over here at Level Effect. And I hope you've really enjoyed Greg's content. As you can see, he's a great instructor. He's very knowledgeable, tons of experience, and he really likes taking time to make concepts relatable and understandable. And as you can see, you can ask him any question, and he will have a good answer for you. So thank you for making the time. Thank you for showing up over here and getting your hands a little bit dirty over there. If some of you were writing some of the rules on the side as we were going. And thank you, Greg, for coming out to our stream over here on the weekend. We're gonna have to pull you back in for another 1 or 2 maybe, and dive some more. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Okay, well, that's it for the rest of the day. So I hope everyone has a good rest of your weekend. Go and enjoy the content, and go and hop in SOC 100-5 when you get some time. And one last comment over there. Hello, Anthony. I just wanted to tell you the course is absolutely fantastic. You're not here because you're 6 weeks behind. Okay, all right. Well, I'm glad you're still at it, keeping at it. That's the most important part. Don't stop. Just be consistent. Awesome.
Persistence is the key to success. And I think even in our live course, a lot of people get in the mindset of like, I've got to be done by the end date. We don't operate like that. The only way to fail any of our content is to give up and to stop.
Yep.
So
that's it.
Whether you're a month behind, 5 months behind, you're going to get there. Just persist, learn at your own pace, have a good time with it, make it fun. If you're not learning and enjoying it, like, it's not going to get better in the day job. It just gets harder when you get to work, and you're dealing again with all the other people and the processes. So enjoy what you do, and keep learning, and be humble about it. You know?
Yeah.
I get told all the time about the things I don't know and see, and it's good. I love working with super smart people and learning from them all the time. It's fantastic.
Team sport. That's it. Cool. Well, again, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the support. Had a bunch of follows, some subs. We had a raid today as well, too. So good to see all the action from everyone in the community as well, too, getting involved. We're around in Discord. So after today, you can always hit us up both in Discord. Greg's around as well, too. And hopefully we'll see you all in death. Become SOC analysts of death. Hopefully we can get you in there at some point. So thank you again, everyone. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Have a good day.